Hi, welcome back to Healing Hearts and Honest Conversations. I'm Maria,
And I'm Veronica.
and we are on our 6th episode, our Valentines episode.
Happy V-Day.
Or Galentine, whichever you are.
Yep.
Right.
So we thought that it would be a perfect time to talk about love and how we define love and different aspects of our relationships that we have with,
Right.
different people. So whether you're in an intimate relationship, a friendship, or with your kids, your animals, co-workers.
Right.
So we kind of want to share a little bit about what that love might be, and our explanation or definition of that may be different from yours. So it's not anything that we're taking out of textbook. It's just how we interpret love based on our relationships.
Right. Right. I think the first thing is talking about which within each relationship it's different.
Yes.
So our friendship love is
Yes.
different. Then if you have love for your children, family, whether it's intimate love. So I don't know, where do we want to start? What do we want to start with? We talked about most love is acts of
right. So
kindness,
love language, figuring
Yes.
out what the love language is. And this
Right.
could also, I think the love languages, if anybody out there knows or has taken a love language quiz, they're free online. You just look at 5 love languages quizzes, and you can figure out what your love language is, whether you're single in a relationship or as a parent. I believe there's one, and a
Right.
youth one. So each relationship will be played based on your love language, so to speak.
Right.
So, and sometimes some people don't have to take the quiz to know, I know that, my son or my daughter or my friend, whatever, that they love it when I, tell them, I love you.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And other times it's like a hug means, they love them, the world, right? Or, some form of affection or whatever. I think the easy one would be kids.
That's the easy one, I think.
I think the intimate relationship one is a little more difficult.
So I think with your kids, I think for me, the one thing, so now that my son is older, so kind of his thing is he doesn't like to be smothered, of course. Don't, be in my space unless I invite you into my space now that he's an adult, technically, his first year. But I think also that sometimes when he wants that affection or attention or whatever you want to call it, sometimes as a parent, I'm like, really, right now? And so I have to drop what I'm doing and listen to him without distraction or turn off the TV or get off my cell phone or get off my computer, because at that moment, that's what he needs. Even though it's not convenient for me, I always feel like as a parent, I have to make myself available.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's how I show him that I love him. In addition to doing with all the parents things, like making sure there's food on the table,
Right.
the bills are paid, that kind of
the
stuff.
basic necessities.
Yeah. But I think I want to say fill his bucket, that kind of thing. I have to drop what I'm doing and just pay attention to him. And usually it's not even for very long.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe 5 or 10 minutes, and then he's like, okay, I'm going back to my game. And then that's all it took at that moment, right?
And I think also to depend, so when there were babies, and then when they were preschool to elementary, that kind of changed. Maybe you would give them a kiss on the cheek to goodbye, whatever, or they were too attached to you to go to school. And then they go into junior high school, they're like, Mom, drop me off at the corner, right?
Right.
And that's a different kind of love. It's they're not embarrassed to be by you, but they don't want to be seen with their parents because they want to seem more independent, so to speak, right?
Yes.
Versus when they're adults, sometimes that kind of switches where, they want to hear from you. They want to be shown, some form of love, whatever that might be. So my kids are older as well. So mine, 20s and 30s. And when we get off the phone, and this has always been something that from when they were little that I would always make sure to tell them that I love them.
Yes.
Because growing up, I was not told that.
Right.
Right. And so, and again, it might be something sometimes I kind of think about maybe it's like culturally, but I also think like not only is it culturally, because I've seen this in other families that are not Latino families, is that they weren't modeled that,
Right.
where they would do those words of affirmations. Right. Okay, so we are back. We were talking about like not only were we were talking about Latino families, but just families in general, in terms of how they display love. Sometimes that wasn't modeled as when individuals were growing up, right? So like either they weren't shown that, or they were shown a different type of love. So like, for example, like growing up in the Latino household, right? My Latino household, it was like we were like, they would give you these nicknames, right? That nowadays we're like, I would not want anybody to call me that. So like gorda, flaca, fea, negra, güera, right? So and for the Latino, like I'll say like in you know, with my dad or, you know, cousins or whatnot, when they would call me, or my grandfather, they would call me certain things, that was their way of showing love and affection.
Right.
But growing up, I was just like, why are they calling me this? Like, I didn't like it, right? But I was just like, well, that's their way. And then they would say, oh, that's because I'm giving you cariño, which means affection, right? And I'm like, okay, well, I guess. But they never really said that they like, they wouldn't be like, oh, I love you. Yeah. So, that's just kind of how it was. So when I had my kids, I wanted to show them something different.
Right. I think like the words that you hear when you're younger become your affirmations when you're older.
Yes.
So it's important, as we're talking about love, it's important like words and actions, that those two things match, and it doesn't matter what kind of relationship it is, but that those two things actually match and mean. Like, if you're giving love, they should be loving words.
Right, and not like
derogatory nicknames.
Right. Because we, you know, and people don't understand it, but I feel like it's some kind of, it creates this insecurity and self-esteem issues in us that our family or our parents didn't really realize it, and that probably wasn't their intention.
Right.
They weren't trying to do it like maliciously. You know, I mean, some of our aunts or uncles or cousins might have, but they're like, oh, look at her. She looks like she's wearing red lipstick. That means like she's a puta, or she's easy or something, right? Yeah. So, but in terms of like parents, what they showed us was not necessarily something, when they were giving us those nicknames, was to make us feel bad, but that was their way of showing some kind of love and affection.
Yes. So as you're talking, I'm thinking like the one love we didn't talk about was self-love, but we talked about it at dinner because it's important. How like when you're growing up, how do people role model like the self-love stuff to you? Or how did they role model the self-love to you? If they did at all.
I don't know, that I would have to think about. Man, that is like, nothing pops to my head that said, oh, you know, like my mom would tell me this. I know like my mom would like to like make sure I had cute outfits. Right. I mean, I was the only girl, so my mom had told me like she tried with when she had my little brother, she was hoping for another girl. I'm the lucky one. So I got I would say I got maybe a little bit more attention from my mom, because she wanted to make sure like I was dressed cute, and she would show me certain things, or you know, like there would be certain kind of music she would, which I remember, I think it was, I don't know if her name was, if it was Diana Ross or another one, but it was like, oh my God, something to do with like you work hard for your money. Do you know that song? Remember that song?
Yeah, isn't that Gloria something? I don't know. But anyways.
Yeah. But and then when my mom was a housekeeper, right? So she would always, like, to me, she demonstrated like no matter what you're doing in life, like it's okay to do these type of jobs because you shouldn't be ashamed of it. So that was because one of my first jobs was being like a janitor at the at a place, which I'm not gonna say what place, but I mean it was an inappropriate place. But that's what my dad was. It was a janitor. My mom was a housekeeper. So I didn't feel shame doing that because that's what they taught me is like be okay with what you're doing type of thing. Right. So I don't know if that was kind of like part of self-love, but I didn't feel like I felt like I was degrading myself doing that type of work.
So I think like I remember my mom, like in my memories, like she was just about like us. And like going to work, but even after work she used to do her schedule based on us, like our sports and our things, because I think now like what do I do that's self-love now as far as like taking care of myself and like getting my nails done or getting my hair done or getting a pedicure or a massage or like
hanging out with your girls.
Yes, of course. Hanging out with my girls. And I don't remember my mom doing those things. Like, I don't remember my mom. Like, they used to go out. My parents used to go out. Like, they would go out as a couple sometimes. Or, like, they would have parties and then people would come to our house. But only if everybody was together, couples.
Yeah.
But I remember, like, the first time she did something that was girl-like just for her, was not until, like, probably I was, like, 12 or 13. Is the first time I remember. And that was just like a night. That wasn't even like she built this routine and that's what she did. It wasn't even like that. It was like one night or something. But I remember like it was not the way that we do it. It was not like we have these set times that we meet up or like Lavette and Londa and I have Saturday mornings. That's our girl time. We go, we catch up, we like what's going on with each other and what do you guys need, that kind of thing. And I don't remember my mom having that.
Yeah.
I remember like we would see our relatives around every party, holiday, stuff like that. But I don't think she had like something she did just for herself. Yeah.
Yeah, and I can't remember my mom doing that for herself either. I have little glimpses of when we would go and visit two of her friends. But that might have been like maybe two occasions that stand out to me. But other than that, like we would go like every Sunday, we'd go to church. After church, we hang out with my mom's first cousin and her kids, and we would do like, but it was more like the kids stuff. So it wasn't the husbands weren't involved in it. It was just them, and then we'd go to my grandma's.
Right.
And so I don't know if it was necessarily something that she did for herself. Maybe, I don't know, to get away from my dad. I don't know. But I also feel like because my mom was married to my dad was so controlling, there wasn't any of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to think about and bringing that one back up.
Well, because it's such an important thing. Yeah. Like, self-love, of course, bleeds into all the other types of loves. Like, can you really be there for your kids if you're not taking care of yourself? Or can you be there for your friends if you're not taking care of yourself? Can you be there in an intimate relationship if you're not taking care of yourself? And so I think it's the fact that no one said, this is really important when you're growing up to have self-love. I think that maybe that affected all the other types of relationships. And
when you said that, something just popped in my head, and I'm like, it really did affect my relationship.
Yeah?
Yeah. So my previous relationship, I didn't realize until after the fact, right? Because, I had to have a lot of self-reflection and work on myself. But what I came to realize is that even though my ex would tell me and show me, he would tell me like words of affirmation, right? That he loved me, I'm beautiful, blah, 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 right? He would hold my hand, he would hug me whenever I needed a hug. I could just come up to him or ask him and no problem. He'd stop doing whatever he's doing to attend to my needs, whatnot. But it was like I kept throughout my 21 years of being in the relationship is that I continued to, and I guess make him prove to me
Mm-hmm.
that he loved me
Right.
without him even realizing that. But I didn't realize that until after the fact, that no matter what he did or said, I was still trying to, I still didn't trust it.
Right.
That you still had to keep proving that you loved me.
Wow.
Because at any moment that love can be taken from you, right?
Right.
Or the person, because again, growing up, I didn't see, that was not demonstrated to me. The whole opposite was demonstrated to me,
Right.
like very abusive, aggressive, I don't know, environment that I didn't want that kind of love. So I don't know, maybe subconsciously I was waiting for that to happen, which it never did, thankfully.
Mm-hmm.
But still, like, I still needed you to prove your love to me. And even though that for 21 years, it was nothing but love, but yet.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that was, and
Like not being able to recognize it.
right. So that I'm saying, like, it bleeds into all these other relationships, right? And I think our friendships are really good in terms that, because just today when we're leaving, saying goodbye from dinner, right? One of our friends was like, "Okay, bye, love you," and then when we leave each other like, "Okay, bye, love you."
Yeah.
And it's a different type of love, right? It's like, for me, my closest friends, like, I love them because I feel like they're part of my family, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then there's like a little meme that we've seen that it says, if you've been friends for more than 7 years, you're family.
Right.
And that's how I feel, like, we're family.
Right.
So I'm going to tell my family I love them.
Right.
Because I never know, like, if I ever will get the chance to tell you I love you again, right?
That is true.
And so I think that's another part that we have to think about, is like, because sometimes some people are like, well, I don't want to tell a person I love them because I don't want them to think I'm needy, or that, I need them to, speed up the process, or whatever the case may be, right? Because some of us are like afraid of love, or we're like, okay, what does that mean? Or we don't trust it, or whatever the case may be. So I think some people will be hesitant to tell a person they love them. But again, it doesn't necessarily have to be words.
No, I think, like, you already know. I mean, yes, it's good to tell each other that, but in a sense, you already know that person loves and cares for you, because of whatever they've already done before that, and they will continue to do.
Yeah.
I think that's in. Okay, but I want to go back to self-love.
Okay.
Because I'm like, I was trying to think, like, is there a time where anyone ever said, I mean, like, okay, so we went to private Catholic school, so of course it was like, always like, God loved you, that kind of stuff, right? Okay, but there wasn't like anything about how to take care of yourself emotionally, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, we did things because that's the way you behave. Like, this is the way you need to behave. So if you are going to go to, like, school, this is the way that you're going to behave. If we're going out in public, this is the way that you're going to behave. If you're playing sports, you're going to play sports and be a good sportsman, because that's the right thing to do.
Right.
Like, but it wasn't equated with you do these things in order to take care of yourself, or in order to show that you love yourself, or in order to communicate, like, self-respect.
Mm-hmm.
That's not why you did them. You did them because they were the right thing to do.
Right. And there was kind of like a rule around it, right?
Right.
Like your beliefs and values, that this is what you need to follow because that's society's views of how we need to behave ourselves. And you were mentioning, like, self-love, how you take care of yourself now, like more like hygiene stuff, right? So to speak.
Yeah.
Nails, hair, whatever, right? Because if we feel like we look good, then we're gonna feel good, right? And I know for myself, like, when I dress up, I feel really good, and I'm like, yeah, and I'm like, oh, look, I look nice, or I look pretty, or whatever, and I'm nice to myself,
right?
But like earlier, I'm like, look at this hair. So right away, I'm like, okay, I better not be mean to myself. And you're like, oh, you're fine. That's it. Right. So then right away, like, if we see some kind of flaw, it's like we that self-love that we're supposed to be promoting is no longer there. We're just finding some way to put ourselves down, which right now we're trying to build ourselves up, not put ourselves down.
Yes.
So, and I know that, you know, when we talk about like self-esteem, no one, at least no one I've met that has a number 10 out of 1 to 10, a 10 self-esteem every single day.
No.
Right? No. There's always going to be something that we might question about ourselves, or how we reacted, or what decisions we made, or how we look, or how we feel. And I think that internally, one of the things is, if I have a hard time loving me, how can I actually love another person or demonstrate that to them?
Right. I think that's true. Not that we have to be perfectly put together when we meet the person that we want to be with, but I think like not knowing how to take care of yourself, like physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. Like if you don't know how to take care of yourself, then it's going to be limited support that you're going to be able to offer the other person. Or how are you guys going to move together towards the same goal if you're not doing that kind of self-love?
Yeah, or some people grew up, or, you know, or maybe they have the understanding that love is you buy me stuff, right? Materialistic. So, you know, if you buy me these things, or you buy me flowers, or you buy me a car, or you buy me dinner, or whatever, that means you love me, right? Or other times people might, you know, again, whatever they were modeled, right?
Right.
And let's say they are, you know, they're with a partner that's abusive, whether it's emotionally, you know, or physically, or whatever, and this is what they were modeled. They might see that as, you know, they love me, and then, I must have did something to cause them to be upset, but yet that's how they show love, right? Because then they're like, I love you, but you just made me angry. It's like, oh, okay. And then you get that you know, some people start to build that understanding that this is love. And then so what happens is then I feel like we start to seek those relationships, right? So we're looking at, what was the thing that I was thinking about is like, we're looking for relationships, and I've heard this somewhere else, that we're recreating our trauma. Right? And nobody wants to do that. Like if I said, hey, what kind of man are you looking for? One that's going to let me recreate my trauma, right? Nobody's going to want to do that. But it's like subconsciously, because we've been modeled certain patterns that when we make a connection, we think that's the connection we're making. And then it's not until we're self-aware that we're like, oh, we're recreating certain patterns. And then again, you know, with our kids and what we're demonstrating to them and showing them, and with our friends. So like if you're mean to your friends, and you know, you're always negative about either where you're going, what you're doing, or even just negative about yourself, it's like, how many of your friends are really going to want to hang out with you? They're going to limit their interactions with you, right? They might be like, I care for you and love you, but from afar. Right? Because you're Debbie Downer, or like, you know, whenever we go out, you're never happy but what we're doing, even if we let you choose, or something to that effect, right?
Yeah. I think there's just a lot of different aspects. As you were talking, I started thinking about like, you know, that thing, like, because to me, like, gratitude is attractive. Like when you're talking to somebody and they're grateful that things happen to them, and they're not always, like you said, the downer, like the world is against me, and like they can't see anything that is good for them. And so I remember watching this thing, and I think it was Steve Harvey that I saw it on, but I mean, it's been everywhere. So he was like, you know, you have to change your, like, I have to into I have the opportunity to, or I get to. So I get to go to work today, and I get to pay my bills today because I have enough money, and I get to. And so I think like that is also part of the self-love thing, is that recognizing that you have all these great opportunities in your life, and giving yourself credit for creating those great opportunities. And not always thinking like you have to do things that you don't like to do, because who wants that running around in their head all the time? Like, oh, my affirmation is that I have to do all these things. Like, you want to know that you're grateful for things that come up. And I think that having a good practice of being grateful is good, not only for your self-love, but also for loving other people. And being able to recognize that whatever it is that they bring to the table, it makes the relationship stronger.
And when you were talking about that, I was thinking like, when I was working multiple jobs, I
like
can't even
7.
I can't even remember when I've only had one job. Shoot.
Yes.
Yeah. So when I had a lot of jobs, right? Well, when in my relationship, when I had 3 jobs, it was like for me, I was like, I want to make sure that my family's financially okay. We don't have to worry about money, right? Because however I grew up, right, we were limited with funds and whatnot. And for me, working hard and making that money to make sure that we're financially stable. Not that my partner wasn't contributing, because absolutely he was. But for me, in my head was like, I don't want to be poor, whatever my perception of
Right.
poor was growing up. So for me, in my head was like, I love my family that much that I'm going to sacrifice this. So my time to work 3 jobs to make sure that we are financially stable.
Right.
Right. But that's not how my family's seen it.
No.
And then when the one person who told me the one thing that I, for myself, was like, this is what I'm doing for our family. This is one way I'm showing love to make sure that we are stable in the finance part. When that person told me, the money, no matter that if I have a job or not, I'm not staying because of the money, because that has nothing to do with it. And that was the one thing I was working hard to do. And I'm like, what the hell? That made me realize, like, I did all this for nothing. In terms of like the multiple jobs.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm like, so then I had to change my mindset. I mean, I don't have 7 jobs anymore, but I'm down to 3. But I'm actually taking more time to love myself in terms of allowing myself to live my life and not work to live.
Right.
Is that right?
You're right.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It was, and it goes back to what shows love. So like for your partner, he would have rather spent time with you than had the money in the bank. And that's not everybody, but that was for him. And I think like knowing what the love language is, or whatever you want to call it, of the person you're with, like either intimately or friendship or even your kids, like knowing what is important to them is how you show love, not just this is important to me and so it has to be important to you also. So
I know, it's so true, because that's how I seen it.
Right.
It's important to me, so it must be important to you because you're with me.
Yes. So.
Well, I think we could do like multiple chapters on this because it has me like thinking other things related to like love and how we demonstrate love with different parts of ourselves and what we perceived as love, and what was demonstrated to us, and then what changes we're making now to ensure that we're loving ourselves and we're taking the time to acknowledge that, because we don't, a lot of times we don't do that. We're quick to identify and acknowledge the negative versus the positive and all the great stuff that we've done and how we can love ourselves better.
Yeah. And I think the second part is just accepting your partner, whoever that is, or your friend, or whoever it is that you are choosing to love, and knowing what is important to them.
Yeah.
And then responding to it. So.
Yeah. So anyway, I hope you all have a great Valentine's and that you spread love and that you also show yourself some love. So until next time, bye. Okay, so we are back. We were talking about like not only were talking about Latino families, but just families in general, in terms of how they displayed love. Sometimes that wasn't modeled as when individuals were growing up, right? So like either they weren't shown that or they were shown a different type of love. So like, for example, like growing up in the Latino household, right? My Latino household, it was like we were like, they would give you these nicknames, right? That nowadays were like, I would not want anybody to call me that. So like gorda, flaca, fea, negra, güera, right? So and for the Latino, like I'll say like in with my dad or cousins or whatnot, when they would call me, or my grandfather, they would call me certain things that was their way of showing love and affection.
Right.
But growing up, I was just like, why are they calling me this? Like, I didn't like it, right? But I was just like, well, that's their way. Mm-hmm. And then they would say, oh, that's because I'm giving you cariño, which means affection, right? And I'm like, okay, well, I guess. But they never really said that they they wouldn't be like, oh, I love you. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, that's just kind of how it was. So when I had my kids, I wanted to show them something different.
Right. I think like the words that you hear when you're younger become your affirmations when you're older.
Yes.
So it's important, as we're talking about love, it's important like words and actions, that those two things match, and it doesn't matter what kind of relationship it is, but that those two things actually match and mean. Like, if you're giving love, they should be loving words.
Right, and not like
derogatory nicknames.
Right. Because we, and people don't understand it, but I feel like it's some kind of, it creates this insecurity and self-esteem issues in us that our family or our parents didn't really realize it, and that probably wasn't their intention.
Right.
They weren't trying to do it like maliciously. I mean, some of our aunts or uncles or cousins might have. They're like, oh, look at her. She looks like she's wearing red lipstick. That means like she's a puta, or right. She's easy or something, right? Yeah. So, but in terms of like parents, what they showed us was not necessarily something when they were giving us those nicknames was to make us feel bad, but that was their way of showing some kind of love and affection.
Yes. So as you're talking, I'm thinking like the one love we didn't talk about was self-love, but we talked about it at dinner because it's important. How like when you're growing up, how do people role model like the self-love stuff to you? Or how did they role model the self-love to you? If they did at all.
I don't know, that I would have to think about. Man, that is like, nothing pops to my head that said, oh, my mom would tell me this. I know like my mom would like to make sure I had cute outfits. Right. I mean, I was the only girl, so my mom had told me like she tried with when she had my little brother, she was hoping for another girl. I'm the lucky one. So I got I would say I got maybe a little bit more attention from my mom because she wanted to make sure like I was dressed cute, and she would show me certain things or like there would be certain kind of music she would, which I remember, I think it was, I don't know if her name was, if it was Diana Ross or another one, but it was like, oh my God, something to do with like you work hard for your money. Do you know that song? Remember that song?
Isn't that Gloria something? I don't know. But
okay.
Anyways.
Yeah. But and then when my mom was a housekeeper, right? So she would always, like, to me, she demonstrated like no matter what you're doing in life, like it's okay to do these type of jobs because you shouldn't be ashamed of it. So that was because one of my first jobs was being like a janitor at the at a place, which I'm not going to say what place, but I mean, it was an inappropriate place. But that's what my dad was. It was a janitor. My mom was a housekeeper. So I didn't feel shame doing that because that's what they taught me is like, be okay with what you're doing type of thing. Right. So I don't know if that was kind of like part of self-love, but I didn't feel like I felt like I was degrading myself doing that type of work.
So I think like, I remember my mom, like in my memories, like she was just about like us and like going to work, but even after work she used to do her schedule based on us, like our sports and our things, because I think now like what do I do that's self-love now as far as like taking care of myself and like getting my nails done or getting my hair done or getting a pedicure or a massage or like
hanging out with your girls.
Yes, of course, hanging out with my girls. And I don't remember my mom doing those things. Like, I don't remember my mom. Like, they used to go out. My parents used to go out. Like, they would go out as a couple sometimes. Or, like, they would have parties and then people would come to our house. But only if everybody was together, couples.
Yeah.
But I remember, like, the first time she did something that was girl-like just for her, was not until, like, probably I was, like, 12 or 13. Is the first time I remember. And that was just like a night. That wasn't even like she built this routine and that's what she did. It wasn't even like that. It was like one night or something. But I remember, like, it was not the way that we do it. It was not like we have these set times that we meet up, or like, you know, Lavette and Londa and I have Saturday mornings. That's our girl time. We go, we catch up, you know, we like what's going on with each other and what do you guys need, that kind of thing. And I don't remember my mom having that.
Yeah.
I remember, like, you know, like we would see our relatives around every party, holiday, stuff like that. But I don't think she had, like, something she did just for herself. Yeah.
Yeah, and I can't remember my mom doing that for herself either. I have little glimpses of when we would go and visit two of her friends. But that might have been like maybe two occasions that stand out to me. But other than that, like we would go like every Sunday, we'd go to church. After church, we hang out with my mom's first cousin and her kids, and we would do like, but it was more like the kids stuff. So it wasn't the husbands weren't involved in it. It was just them, and then we'd go to my grandma's.
Right.
And so I don't know if it was necessarily something that she did for herself. Maybe, I don't know, to get away from my dad. I don't know. But I also feel like because my mom was married to my dad was so controlling, there wasn't any of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to think about and bringing that one back up.
Well, because it's such an important thing. Like, self-love, of course, bleeds into all the other types of loves. Like, can you really be there for your kids if you're not taking care of yourself? Or can you be there for your friends if you're not taking care of yourself? Can you be there in an intimate relationship if you're not taking care of yourself? And so I think it's the fact that no one said, this is really important when you're growing up to have self-love. I think that maybe that affected all the other types of relationships. And
when you said that, something just popped in my head, and I'm like, it really did affect my relationships.
Yeah?
Yeah. So my previous relationship, I didn't realize until after the fact, right? Because, you know, I had to have a lot of self-reflection and work on myself. But what I came to realize is that even though my ex would tell me and show me, you know, he would tell me like words of affirmation, right? That he loved me, I'm beautiful, blah, 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 right? He would hold my hand, he would hug me whenever I needed a hug. I could just come up to him or ask him and no problem. He'd stop doing whatever he's doing to attend to my needs, whatnot. But it was like I kept throughout my 21 years of being in the relationship is that I continued to, and I guess make him prove to me that he loved me.
Right.
Without him even realizing that. But I didn't realize that until after the fact, that no matter what he did or said, I was still trying to, I still didn't trust it.
Right.
That you still had to keep proving that you loved me. Wow. Because at any moment that love can be taken from you, right?
Right.
Or the person, because again, growing up, that was not demonstrated to me. The whole opposite was demonstrated to me, like very abusive, aggressive, I don't know, environment that I didn't want that kind of love. So I don't know, maybe subconsciously I was waiting for that to happen, which it never did, thankfully. But still, like, I still needed you to prove your love to me. And even though that for 21 years, it was nothing but love, but yet. So that was, and
like not being able to recognize it.
Right. So that I'm saying, like, it bleeds into all these other relationships, right? And I think our friendships are really good in terms that Because just today when we're leaving, saying goodbye from dinner, right? One of our friends was like, "Okay, bye, love you," and then when we leave each other like, "Okay, bye, love you."
Yeah.
And it's a different type of love, right? It's like for me, my closest friends, like I love them because I feel like they're part of my family, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then there's like a little meme that we've seen that it says, if you've been friends for more than 7 years, you're family.
Right.
And that's how I feel. Like, we're family.
Right.
So I'm going to tell my family I love them.
Right.
Because I never know, like, if I ever will get the chance to tell you I love you again, right?
That is true.
And so I think that's another part that we have to think about is like, because sometimes some people are like, well, I don't want to tell a person I love them because I don't want them to think I'm needy, or that I need them to, speed up the process, or whatever the case may be, right? Because some of us are like afraid of love, or we're like, okay, what does that mean? Or we don't trust it, or whatever the case may be. So I think some people will be hesitant to tell a person they love them. But again, it doesn't necessarily have to be words.
No, I think like you already know. I mean, yes, it's good to tell each other that, but in a sense, you already know that person loves and cares for you, because of whatever they've already done before that, and they will continue to do.
Yeah.
I think that's in. Okay, but I want to go back to self-love.
Okay.
Because I'm like, I was trying to think, like, is there a time where anyone ever said, I mean, like, okay, so we went to private Catholic school, so of course it was like, always like, God loved you, that kind of stuff, right? Okay, but there wasn't like anything about how to take care of yourself emotionally, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, we did things because that's the way you behave. Like, this is the way you need to behave. So if you are going to go to like school, this is the way that you're going to behave. If we're going out in public, this is the way that you're going to behave. If you're playing sports, you're going to play sports and be a good sportsman, because that's the right thing to do.
Right.
Like, but it wasn't equated with you do these things in order to take care of yourself, or in order to show that you love yourself, or in order to communicate like self-respect. Mm-hmm. That's not why you did them. You did them because they were the right thing to do.
Right. And there was kind of like a rule around it, right?
Right.
Like your beliefs and values, that this is what you need to follow because that's society's views of how we need to behave ourselves. And you were mentioning like, self-love, how you take care of yourself now, like more like hygiene stuff, right? So to speak.
Yeah.
Nails, hair, right? Because if we feel like we look good, then we're gonna feel good, right? And I know for myself, like when I dress up, I feel really good, and I'm like, and I'm like, oh, look, I look nice, or I look pretty, or whatever, and I'm nice to myself,
right?
But like earlier, I'm like, look at this hair. So right away, I'm like, okay, I better not be mean to myself. And you're like, oh, you're fine. That's it. Right? So then right away, like if we see some kind of flaw, it's like we that self-love that we're supposed to be promoting is no longer there. We're just finding some way to put ourselves down, which right now we're trying to build ourselves up, not put ourselves down.
Yes.
So, and I know that, when we talk about like self-esteem, no one I've met that has a number 10 out of 1 to 10, a 10 self-esteem every single day.
No.
Right? No. There's always going to be something that we might question about ourselves, or how we reacted, or what decisions we made, or how we look, or how we feel. And I think that internally, one of the things is, if I have a hard time loving me, how can I actually love another person or demonstrate that to them?
Right. I think that's true. Not that we have to be perfectly put together when we meet the person that we want to be with, but I think like not knowing how to take care of yourself, like physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. Like if you don't know how to take care of yourself, then it's going to be limited support that you're going to be able to offer the other person. Or how are you guys going to move together towards the same goal if you're not doing that kind of self-love?
Yeah, or some people grew up, or maybe they have the understanding that love is you buy me stuff. right? Materialistic. So, you know, if you buy me these things, or you buy me flowers, or you buy me a car, or you buy me dinner, or whatever, that means you love me, right? Or other times people might, you know, again, whatever they were modeled, right?
Right.
And let's say they are, you know, they're with a partner that's abusive, whether it's emotionally, you know, or physically or whatever, and this is what they were modeled, they might see that as, you know, they love me, and then, I must have did something to cause them to be upset, but yet that's how they show love, right? Because then they're like, I love you, but you just made me angry. It's like, oh, okay. And then you get that you know, some people start to build that understanding that this is love. And then so what happens is then I feel like we start to seek those relationships, right? So we're looking at, what was the thing that I was thinking about is like, we're looking for relationships, and I've heard this somewhere else, that we're recreating our trauma. Right? And nobody wants to do that. Like if I said, hey, what kind of man are you looking for? One that's going to let me recreate my trauma, right? Nobody's going to want to do that. But it's like subconsciously, because we've been modeled certain patterns that when we make a connection, we think that's the connection we're making. And then it's not until we're self-aware that we're like, oh, we're recreating certain patterns. And then again, you know, with our kids and what we're demonstrating to them and showing them, and with our friends. So like if you're mean to your friends, and you know, you're always negative about either where you're going, what you're doing, or even just negative about yourself, it's like, how many of your friends are really going to want to hang out with you? They're going to limit their interactions with you, right? They might be like, I care for you and love you, but from afar. Right? Because you're Debbie Downer, or like, you know, whenever we go out and you're never happy but what we're doing, even if we let you choose, or something to that effect, right?
Yeah. I think there's just a lot of different aspects. As you were talking, I started thinking about like, you know, that thing, like, because to me, like, gratitude is attractive. Like when you're talking to somebody and they're grateful that things happen to them, and they're not always, like you said, the downer, like the world is against me, and like they can't see anything that is good for them. And so I remember watching this thing, and I think it was Steve Harvey that I saw it on, but I mean, it's been everywhere. So he was like, you know, you have to change your, like, I have to into I have the opportunity to, or I get to. So I get to go to work today, and I get to pay my bills today because I have enough money, and I get to. And so I think like that is also part of the self-love thing, is that recognizing that you have all these great opportunities in your life, and giving yourself credit for creating those great opportunities. And not always thinking like you have to do things that you don't like to do, because who wants that running around in their head all the time? Like, oh, my affirmation is that I have to do all these things. Like, you want to know that you're grateful for things that come up. And I think that having a good practice of being grateful is good, not only for your self-love, but also for loving other people. And being able to recognize that whatever it is that they bring to the table, it makes the relationship stronger.
And when you were talking about that, I was thinking like, when I was working multiple jobs, I
like
can't even,
7.
I can't even remember when I've only had one job. Shoot.
Yes.
Yeah. So when I had a lot of jobs, right? Well, when in my relationship, when I had 3 jobs, it was like, for me, I was like, I want to make sure that my family's financially okay. We don't have to worry about money, right? Because however I grew up, right, we were limited with funds and whatnot. And for me, working hard and making that money to make sure that we were financially stable. Not that my partner wasn't contributing, because absolutely he was. But for me, in my head was like, I don't want to be poor, whatever my perception of poor was growing up. So for me, in my head was like, I love my family that much that I'm going to sacrifice this. So my time to work 3 jobs to make sure that we are financially stable. Right. But that's not how my family's seen it.
No.
And then when the one person who told me the one thing that for myself was like, this is what I'm doing for our family. This is one way I'm showing love to make sure that we are stable in the finance part. When that person told me, the money, no matter that if I have a job or not, I'm not staying because of the money, because that has nothing to do with it. And that was the one thing I was working hard to do. And I'm like, what the hell? That made me realize, like, I did all this for nothing. In terms of like the multiple jobs.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm like, so then I had to change my mindset. I mean, I don't have 7 jobs anymore, but I'm down to 3. But I'm actually taking more time to love myself in terms of allowing myself to live my life and not work to live.
Right.
Is that right?
You're right.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It goes back to what shows love. So like for your partner, he would have rather spent time with you than had the money in the bank. And that's not everybody, but that was for him. And I think like knowing what the love language is, or whatever you want to call it, of the person you're with, like either intimately or friendship or even your kids, like knowing what is important to them is how you show love, not just this is important to me and so it has to be important to you also. So
I know, it's so true, because that's how I seen it.
Right.
It's important to me, so it must be important to you because you're with me.
Yes. So
well, I think we could do like multiple chapters on this because it has me like thinking other things related to like love and how we demonstrate love with different parts of ourselves and what we perceived as love, and what was demonstrated to us, and then what changes we're making now to ensure that we're loving ourselves and we're taking the time to acknowledge that, because we don't, a lot of times we don't do that. We're quick to identify and acknowledge the negative versus the positive and all the great stuff that we've done and how we can love ourselves better.
Yeah. And I think the second part is just accepting your partner, whoever that is, or your friend, or whoever it is that you are choosing to love, and knowing what is important to them. Yeah. And then responding to it. So.
Yeah. So anyway, I hope you all have a great Valentine's and that you spread love and that you also show yourself some love. So until next time, bye.